What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Gsluke here with a DFS preview for this week's Shriners Children's Open. Going to cover some of my top plays, whether it's my core picks, value picks, fades, and sleepers, all in one video this time around to get you prepared for this week's contest. We're still going to have a live stream tonight that'll be at 7 p.m. Eastern time, but here going to be able to go player by player, talking through some of the top targets I have on the slate. And of course, because it's here on a Wednesday rather than a Monday, we have a much better idea of ownership. We could really discuss the game theory side of things. So going into the future, I'm going to wait to at the very least put out picks on Tuesday or Wednesday, and then do a little bit of a reaction video every single Monday. So the format here is going to change up a bit. I just want to focus a little bit more on the process and a little bit more reflection on the picks. What things went right, what things went wrong, and do we need to learn from going into the future? There's not a ton of content out there really breaking down the process of PGA DFS, looking at how the meta changes from week to week, or of course season to season on the PGA Tour. So something that I'm going to start to incorporate into the channel. So definitely changing things up here, trying to make things even better, more engaging for everyone out there. But we have a ton to talk about this week. Let's go ahead, not waste any more time at all, and get this DFS preview started. All right, the first thing we need to focus on here is going to be the course. So we'll head over to the key stats tab and make sure we're all on the same page here. So this is TPC Summerlin, one of the easier courses you're going to see all year. A scoring average well under 2 under. Last year, a score well past 20 under par won it. And if you look at the last 4 to 5 years, outside of a windy exception, which you see maybe once every 5 to 6 years around Summerlin, you're going to get perfect scoring conditions. It's a 7,200-yard golf course that probably plays closer to a true 6,700 yards. A lot of that due to the elevation change, which you have, about 2,500 feet of elevation there at TPC Summerlin. But on top of that, also a lot firmer fairways than these players are used to. So instead of hitting it 310, 315 yards off the tee, you're going to see some absolute bombs this week. On top of that, you've got yourself pretty much a resort style setup. Most TPC network courses are meant to be a little bit more difficult, but Summerlin is on the easy end of that spectrum. So when I'm looking at comp courses, that's why I take a look at courses like a Craig Ranch, also what we have for the Valero Texas Open. Just a lot of the easier TPC network golf courses are very comparable to what we're going to see here, right? Relatively large greens, not a ton of undulation to them. Just put yourself in position. It's a little bit of a putting contest when it comes down to it, and get to something like a 20 to 25 under par to win. With the key stats, you can see I'm looking at shots gained approach, but specifically the shorter ranges, so that 50 to 125 is going to be especially important this week. In terms of your putting, we have bent grass greens. They're brand new, so they've resodded the golf course. That is important to note here. A complete renovation of every piece of grass on property from tip to toe out there. So you have bent grass greens that went from an A1, A4 bent to a Dominator bent grass. And then for the rough tees and for the fairways, you're dealing with a new strain of Bermuda. So the rough now is a 2 1/4 inch Bermuda grass. You have firmer fairways. You're going to have firmer greens because they're a brand new surface. It could play a little bit differently this year. So I'm looking a little bit more at shots gained around the green, a little bit more at driving accuracy, because I do think that the firmer conditions are going to put a little bit of a premium when it comes to the players that are striking it the best. Most importantly, into greens, where if you're in the fairway, you're going to have no problem applying spin to the golf ball and controlling the ball on extremely firm surfaces. Whereas if you're hitting the ball out of even just 2 1/4 inch Bermuda grass, it's going to be really hard to stop the ball if the greens are as firm as they really think they could be. So a little bit more of a short game type of tournament when it comes to the Shriners than in years past because of some of those renovations. Still looking at shots gained at Birdie Fest. Driving distance is at least in the model, albeit a little bit less important this week. And looking at comp courses, par 5 scoring. And another way to look at driving accuracy is down there with good drive percentage. Now that we have that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about our plays. So we're going to go through our fades, core picks, fades and sleepers, value picks down at the bottom of the board, everything here. So it's going to be a little bit expedited, a little bit of a quicker take on all of the golfers, but still going to bring you all the content. So let's start at the top of the board. I'm going to group these 3 players in the 10K range together. We've got Cantlay, Max Homa, and Sungjae Im. Two of them you can kind of group together with a Cantlay and a Sungjae, have elite course history and are coming into this event with really good form. And both of them are your highest owned players on the slate. So it makes sense, Patrick Cantlay 31.5%. And then down here you have Sungjae at 27.2%. So both players are clearly getting the attention that they deserve. You're just going to have to choose between the two, because if you want to get leverage to either player, you're going to have to invest at least 50% of your lineups into them. And if you're playing both and you're being that much of a chalk donkey, you're really going to have to be unique down low. So, I would say to pick one or the two, maybe even fade both of them based on ownership. I think that is an argument that you could make. I actually thought and considered fading Sungjae here, but we'll talk about why I'm actually playing him over somebody like a Patrick Cantlay. But the real concern with anyone looking at course history, looking at some of the shots gained putting stats from around TPC Summerlin, is they've completely ripped up the greens. They said that they tried not to change the undulation all too much, but anytime you're resurfacing anything, you're going to get minute differences. So any of that muscle memory that players may have had from playing here 4 or 5 years in the past, I don't want to say it's irrelevant, because it's still going to be at least somewhat similar, but it's not going to be a complete carbon copy. And if they're relying on that sort of muscle memory, it may actually get them into a little bit of trouble. So course history, it's not like I'm docking it off of a player. In terms of your ball striking, the type of golf course that Summerlin is, that has not changed. Still, 7,200 yards, still a golf course where it's all about your precision over your distance. So Patrick Cantlay, still a decent course fit, right? He's number 3 in the field when it comes to his Summerlin fit. But I do worry that he's in a spot to have a letdown, right? Patrick Cantlay is not immune to that. After all, he does have the nickname Patrick Can't Play from time to time from a lot of the community. I've been guilty myself of going down that degenerate route and calling somebody a name after they don't have a good performance. But in either circumstance, it's a legitimate thing. You've seen Patrick Cantlay at nearly 20-30% ownership in the past go out there and miss a cut before. And sometimes it's when he's in his best stretch of form. Sometimes it's at a golf course that makes perfect sense for him. And I sniff it happening once again. I know he'll have tournaments like the Travelers where he pretty much always plays well, but then he has tournaments where the course history is extremely volatile. And I know, right? You look at the course history, it's really hard to pass up. An 8th, second, first place finish back there in 2018. Even Sungjae, right? First, 13th, 15th place, where he's got a better course history than even Sungjae. 31.5% ownership. We got to play him at 60-70% of your lineups to get that leverage. So, if this were Monday, this is why I like doing the video a little bit later in the week. I might have hoped that Cantlay was going to be 20% owned and topped him up as a core pick, but now I'm going to put him down as a fade, right? We know he's going to be that huge piece of chalk going into a Wednesday, and somebody that I'm likely avoiding. On the flip side, let's talk about Sungjae and why I'm getting there. So with Sungjae, first off, he's a little bit lower owned than somebody like a Patrick Cantlay, but more importantly, at the President's Cup, played a lot better than Cantlay. So Sungjae, was on the losing side, but you could argue that he was one of the best players at the event. Time and time again, he was the one leading the team back from huge deficits. He was playing alongside Corey Connors, who not only was hitting the ball all over the yard, could not make a putt for his life, like you could imagine. So Sungjae had that little bit of a bowling ball anchor alongside him. I think anybody watching the President's Cup, it's not me taking a jab at Corey Connors. Pretty much every partner that Sungjae had really let him down. And Sungjae was the one there on the back nine making all of those putts, chipping in from off the green, so on and so forth, to keep their team in it. Imagine if he had an even remotely adequate partner, right? Imagine if he was a U.S. team player that had one of those top end machines out there that are going out there and producing. He would have probably gone 5-0. So, Sungjae, based on what we saw at the President's Cup, I was extremely impressed by him, whereas Patrick Cantlay was very disappointing. Him and Xander Schauffele really luck-sacked their way into their record, and you saw it over the weekend. You saw both of them struggle. He's $11,100. He wasn't hitting all that many greens, and the putter wasn't even as strong as we're used to seeing from him. So early on, right, had a strong week, but towards the end of the President's Cup, I think you really started to see the actual form there. And I think some of the early success, just from what I saw from the eye test, may have been a little bit due to the matchup and not so much their actual play. So I'm going to be off of Patrick Cantlay. I think that Sungjae Im's just playing better golf at this point. And that's the only action they've had since the Tour Championship, right? So there's almost been actually a little bit over a month at this point away from golf. These guys aren't in the same stretch of form remotely, right? We can't look at the last 24 rounds here and really make huge assertions because they're not in the stretch of form. They've been away from the game for quite some time. Some players respond well to time off. Some don't, right? Some come back a little bit rusty, and I think that's what we saw with Cantlay. He didn't look like his best self out there, whereas Sungjae Im, a grinder, somebody who's probably playing golf every single day, even if he's not out there on the PGA Tour, looked like his normal self. So that's why I'm willing to get there at 27% ownership as opposed to somebody like a Patrick Cantlay. Next up, we've got Max Homa, 10,600, and for Max Homa, I think he's a fade because of the course history. I'm not a huge course history person, right? Particularly because they're ripping up the greens, but missed cut, and he was a different player then, right? Now he's on a completely different level, particularly over the last few months. He's ascended his game, but what I worry about are the last 24 rounds on approach. And I thought this was a typo, like legitimately when I saw this, I thought it just couldn't be true because he's won his last time out at the Fortinet. The approach play looked pretty dang good at the President's Cup, that's for sure. But yes, over his last 24 measured rounds on the PGA Tour, he is losing to the field with his approach play. And I believe it was 4 of the last 5 PGA Tour starts, he's lost to the field with his irons, which is beyond concerning. It's why at the Fortinet, I didn't end up playing him because the form really looked like an issue. And I know he looked a lot better at the President's Cup. I just can't get that out the back of my head when we know that he's missed the cut all 3 times at this venue. Maybe he likes Vegas a little bit too much. Maybe the course fit just isn't there. Either way, the approach numbers, the course history, all of those sort of things are keeping me off of him. And also, even the bent grass putting numbers. You can see, as compared to like a Sungjae Im and Cantlay, they're all 3 excellent putters. I'd say like top 20 putters on the PGA Tour. He's by far the worst one on bent grass. So if, if we're trying to nitpick there, find reasons to play guys or to stay off of players, those are the sort of things that are going to keep me off of somebody. So 18% ownership. He's not nearly as chalky as somebody like a Patrick Cantlay, but still somebody that I'm going to have to fade to try and get the sort of leverage I need to on some of these core plays coming up. And we talked about Sungjae already. Let's move on to this next tier. We've got Tom Kim at $9,700, and this could very well be tour win number 2 for Tom Kim. You're looking at driving accuracy being one of our key stats. He's one of the most accurate drivers on tour, and that's already at such a young age. He's also one of the best putters that we have on the PGA Tour, and much like a Sungjae Im at the President's Cup, absolutely killed it, and he's super chalky. Now, he's 24.3% owned, but I'd argue that that's probably too low for him. He's somebody that I legitimately think has like a top 20 floor at this point. He's arguably the second best player in this field. Like, I think he's probably better than Max Homa already. Long term, he's going to be a much better player than Max Homa, and I think long term's a better player than Patrick Cantlay, most likely, just based on what we've seen, right? And I know it's the early call at this point. Tom Kim's probably a top 5 player in the world when it's all said and done. $9,700, 25% ownership might literally be too low on the guy, right? I'm comfortable playing him in 40% of my lineups this week, if not closer to 50 when it's all said and done to get true leverage to the field. So $9,700, he's a piece of chalk, much like a Sungjae Im, that I'm just going to have to eat this week because all the ownership up top, because Davis Riley withdrew, there's not even that many guys priced above $9,000 to begin with, is extremely congested. It's all concentrated. I mean, nobody's really low owned. I mean, even in Aaron Wise, who's quote unquote low owned, who's still in the upper end of the teens there. So you're really going to have to eat some pieces of chalk and just navigate yourself elsewhere. And considering the course fit, the type of player that I really look at Tom Kim as, I think he's an absolute steal at that price tag. Taylor Montgomery is a local. He's my number 1 course fit across the board because his start to his year has just been outrageous, right? 2 top 10s to begin his PGA Tour career. And he's been a core pick for both events, right? We were on him early there at the Fortinet. We were on him last week as a core pick in the 9K range, and I can't jump ship. He is from Las Vegas, plays TPC Summerlin all the time. In terms of course fit, he's a great putter, right? We don't have the bent grass putting stats, but to this point has been gaining 1.6 strokes per round with the flat stick. And you'd imagine that bent grass, his home golf course, would most likely be the best surface for him. So just everything really pointing up for Montgomery. The only issue is that the ownership is there. And last week, I had him projected for right around 24% ownership, and he came in lower than that. And now I have him projected for just 20.6%. So, that's pretty much where he came in last week. And I think realistically, we might see the same thing. And the whole issue with guys like Taylor Montgomery is a lot of the casuals that play PGA DFS still don't know who this guy is, right? They weren't watching the Fournette and the Sanderson on TV. Unless they're looking at his box score, they have no idea that this guy has finished in the top 10 twice, or that coming into the PGA Tour, he finished in like the top 15 every single time on the Korn Ferry Tour. They don't know that this guy is just a certified stud, much like a Tom Kim. So I'm going to have plenty of lineups this week that just start with Tom Kim or Taylor Montgomery, and assuming that one of those two players wins, and taking an extremely balanced sort of build, because if you take a look at the top three players here, this is over 75% total ownership. So 75% of lineups are going to have at least one of these three players. Not every lineup is going to be avoiding those three, but a good amount of them are, just so I can get different from the field. And it also opens up quite a bit of flexibility when it comes to your salary. If I wanted to leave salary on the table, it'd be a lot easier to do so. Now, I'm not usually one to go out and do that, but it's the sort of week where these 9K options are strong enough, and I think they have a legitimate chance of winning, where I'm a lot more comfortable than most weeks going with that sort of build. The next core pick I want to touch on is Cam Davis at $9,200. He's a great putter on bent. He's more of a bomber, so doesn't really fit the accuracy build that I'm looking for. But in terms of birdie or better percentage, his shots gained at Birdie Fest, he's like top 5 in the field in all 3 of those categories. So you got to love that with Cam Davis. The bentgrass putter speaks for itself right over there at the Detroit Golf Club for the Rocket Mortgage Classic. Ended up winning on bent grass greens, has had success at the 3M Open over the years. So $9,200, I think he's fairly priced. And I think that's all I got to say about him. I think he's a great play. People know to play him at this point. He's had a lot of success over the last few months. Let's look at the course history. I guess that's one thing I haven't really considered. Yeah, it's been okay, right? He's made his cut 3 times here. Hasn't done anything flashy. The recent form is more the reason to play him. We know he's been in a solid stretch. Did miss the cut at the Fournette, but made the cut at the BMW. Top 16 finishes at the FedEx, Rocket Mortgage, and the 3M Open, which I alluded to a little bit before. Bent grass greens for those 2 performances, and you had a similar golf course over there for the FedEx St. Jude. So in general, I think you're looking at a good course fit, fair price at $9,200, and only 17.9% owned. So you're not looking at a super mega chalky sort of player. At $9,000, we've got our first sleeper pick I want to touch on. So sleeper pick, somebody that's being relatively low owned compared to the rest of the field, compared to a fade, which is somebody that's being a little bit too highly owned for my liking. Tom Hoagie is a sneaky little course fit here. If you take a look at his history, you'll see that he's had success. Top 15 finish, top 25, a top 10 back in 2017. I can look at the recent form. He's also trending in the right direction, right? 12th, 10th place finish, a made cut there at the BMW, and a top 5 at the 3M Open, another golf course with bent grass greens. Just in general, trending in the direction that we're looking for, and even the approach stats are starting to come along, right? He's gaining close to half a stroke per round. The off the tee play, it's not like he's gaining in bunches, but still, the putter is the X factor. If we can get him to go out there and gain on any given week, he could go out there and win a golf tournament. I mean, we've seen it before out there at the Pebble Beach, and he gains on bent grass. So though the putting stats haven't come along yet, right, the ball striking is starting to get there, maybe he pulls the bent grass stats along here at some point and is able to go out there and get that spike performance, because even without the putter, right, I mean, look at it. 12th, 10th, 4th place there at the 3M Open. I mean, he's got it in him. Right, the ball striking stats are there. He's just got to bring that putter, and historically, it's come along the most on bent grass. Moving on to our next core pick, that'll be Taylor Pendrick at $8,700, and a very similar player to a Cam Davis. So I could pretty much copy and paste my argument for Cam Davis and use it for Taylor Pendrick. I mean, even the bent grass numbers are almost identical, right? 0.37 shots gained per round as opposed to the 0.35 for a Cam Davis. But if you look at the ball striking stats, they speak for themselves, right? Much like a Cam Davis, gains a bunch off the tee and on approach. In fact, even more so for somebody like a Taylor Pendrick. And though we don't have extensive course history here, he did make the cut in his first performance there last year. And the recent form is just outstanding too, right? He made the cut at the Fournette, but an 8th, 13th, and a 2nd place finish at the Rocket Mortgage Classic. I'll give you an idea for the type of form that this guy is in. And the one thing I'll say that I am worried about here, it was his performance at the President's Cup, right? So Cam Davis played well. Cam Davis, alongside Adam Scott gave fits to a few of those U.S. teams out there. But Taylor Pendrick was a little bit shaky. He was somebody who missed plenty of putts. I mean, he made that one clutch putt on 18 to really put pressure on Max Homa. Homa had to make, I believe, like a 10-footer to end up winning the match, and he did rather than having it there. Pendrick, though, he had his moments, right? He wasn't horrible. I think he gets a little bit too much flack for what happened out there. But $8,700, I could see myself getting to him in bunches here. Only 9.9% owned. So he's only half as owned as a Cam Davis. He's cheaper and arguably the better course fit. So I really like the play there this week. Next up, we've got Kittiyama Bazain, our second sleeper that I want to touch on here. And last week, through 2 rounds, people were crowning him as the champion. I believe you had one of the broadcasters on ESPN Plus even say that, I think that Bazain is easily going to win this golf tournament, do it handily, and then he completely fell apart. But the reason why he was saying that is the ball striking looked beautiful. He was hitting almost every fairway. The approach stats, I believe he was number 1 or 2 in the field when it came to GIR. $8,200. The putting stats on bent are beautiful. Maybe he goes out there and is able to hold that momentum, because if we take a look at the shots gained, you'll see that the approach play is starting to come around. In fact, it's right back to a neutral. If you take a look at the last 50 rounds, you can see it's actually a little bit better, a little bit into the positive there with the Kittiyama Bazain. But in general, that's better than what we're used to seeing. I mean, he's hemorrhaging strokes with his ball striking for most golf tournaments and just luck sacking himself with the putter. But last week was able to gain significantly both off the tee and on approach. And the putter kind of held him back. He made a bunch of putts on the weekend, but early on when he was putting himself in position just time and time again, was not having that magic putter like usual. So I think he's close. Given the ball striking stats, given just his skill set, which comes down to irons and putting, I think he fits the golf course quite well. And he's only 7.9% owned. Next up, we've got Maverick McNeely, our last core pick here. And the idea is that he's a local, much like a Taylor Montgomery, and he fits the golf course to a T. He's a solid iron player, a really solid bent grass putter, somebody who plays the golf course all the time here. So I'd expect him to have a little bit of familiarity with the bent grass surface. And when we take a look at the shots gained, they're not ideal for McNeely, but you're really buying in on the long-term pedigree. Or the approach stats have held him back. It's why he's missed a few cuts over the last month or so, but still gaining off the tee, still gaining significantly with the putter. And now that he's had a little bit of time off, maybe he's able to get some of that rust off and go out there and have some success. If we take a look at the recent form, you'll get an idea for why he's cheap and also relatively low owned. Missed the cut. He also had, a couple top 35 finishes, but that's about it. Just not going out there and putting up top end upside. So now he's $8,100. Now he's only 8.5% owned. Those are the type of situations where I buy in on McNeely, because I know that he's a volatile, high upside, high pedigree player. Just a lot better than a lot of the guys that you can buy around him here. And people don't like playing people that are out of form. They think that it's something that's too much of a reach. I mean, I played Tom Hoagie at the 3M Open, coming in off like 8 straight missed cuts, and then he almost went out there and won the damn golf tournament. Golf is a volatile sport, and if you're buying in on a player's long-term sample size over what you've seen over maybe the last event or two, that usually works out more often than not. So definitely somebody that I'm willing to get to. Next up, in terms of a value pick, so we're starting to get down towards the bottom of the board here. We have KH Lee at $7,700. KH Lee is a great player at the AT&T Byron Nelson, one of the comp courses that I'm using here. Loves bent grass, and at the President's Cup was an absolute stud. And the stats back it up too. So really, there's nothing going against him. He's gaining across the board, just a slight loser around the green. And even over the last 50 measured rounds, has still been solid. You can see gaining across the board across all 4 categories. Just nothing really I can say bad about the guy. He fits almost every golf course. I think he's a little bit disrespected when it comes to his talent level because he's not the most flashy player out there. And definitely a solid value pick. Our last sleeper is going to be Kittiyama at $7,500, and another local Vegas guy that plays TPC Summerlin all the time, has a spot in the parking lot reserved for him there at TPC Summerlin. Not the best putter on bent, but he's at his home course. We got to give him a little bit of props there. And the approach stats on the European Tour the last couple weeks have been unbelievable. So if you're looking for an approach player that can get hot on the green, somebody that's a local too, has that narrative going for him, then he's your guy. And he's also only projected to be owned at 6.2% of lineups. So I think you're getting a little bit of value there. Our second value is going to be Lucas Herbert at 7,500, and he's a great putter. I mean, on the bent grass surface, is gaining close to a stroke per round, and in terms of his pedigree, is just a much better player than his peers. You're looking at a top 60 player in the world in terms of official World Golf ranking, multiple-time winner internationally, winner on the PGA Tour last year. Just he could really win this golf tournament. He just has to bring the irons to the table. He doesn't always do that. That's why he's not one of the best players in the world, because his short game is off the tee play is elite level stuff. He's gaining close to 0.3 of a stroke per round off the tee, gaining close to 2/3 of a stroke per round with the putter. It's when he pops with the iron play, when he goes out there and he gains even just a stroke or two to the field, he contends and nearly takes down golf tournaments. And in a weak field event like he had last year when he won at the Bermuda Championship, if he even gains like a stroke and a half to the field with the irons, he's going to boat race the field. So you got to love that from a Lucas Herbert. Next up, we've got Matthew NeSmith. He's our last fade, and he's in the 7K range, so it's a little bit atypical for me to have a fade down this low, but I really just wanted to point this fade out because he's 12.7% owned, which doesn't seem all that much, but that's twice as much as a Lucas Herbert. That's twice as much as a Kittiyama. That's a lot more than twice as much as some of the other players here, like a Justin Suh. Ryan Palmer's like royally underowned. I mean, he's chalk for this range, right? Comparatively speaking. He's chalk compared to pretty much all the guys around him. And the issue I have is his bent grass putting stats. He's not the best bent grass putter, though on these greens specifically, he's been fantastic. And a lot of players will buy into that course history, but I'll remind you, remember, we talked about this at the beginning. There's been a renovation, right? A little bit of recontouring. Some of it has been unintentional, I'm sure, with the resodding. Brand new surface. It's no guarantee that he continues to putt at that level after this renovation. In fact, anybody, right? Course history, I mean, even guys like Kittiyama haven't played this very much since the renovation. Like, we have to take it with a grain of salt, right? So you got to have things backing it up. And sure, the approach numbers have been okay for Matthew NeSmith, but should that make him twice as owned or 3 to 4 times as owned as everybody else on the slate? The fact that he's gaining a little bit off the tee and just a marginal gainer on approach? I wouldn't think so. So for me, he's going to be a fade this week, and it just comes down to relative ownership. Our next pick in terms of a value is going to be Adam Svensson, so moving down into the bottom of the 7K range. What I love about him is his approach play. Is one of the best approach players on the PGA Tour, is somebody who is also a spike putter, particularly on the bent grass surface. And anytime we've seen him contend for golf tournaments, it's typically been on bent grass, easy golf courses where you can't get into much trouble off the tee. He tends to be a little bit wild in that department. And around this venue specifically, there's pretty much no water except on the back nine, and usually it's on approach. Off the tee shots don't deal with much water. It's usually when you're hitting your irons, and if there's anything that he does consistently, it's hit iron shots, right? You look at his last 50 measured rounds, you'll see that Svenny down here at 7,200 is gaining across all 4 categories. So one of those consistent players that you're really looking for in terms of the shots gained metrics. The course history, I believe he played here last year. Let's check on that. So $7,200. He played last year and played back here in 2018. Missed the cut both times. So definitely not something that's helping his case there. But the recent form is definitely a little bit of a boost there. So let's take a look at that. $7,200. So Svenny made the cut in his last 5 starts. Missed the cut back there, I believe. Let's see what golf tournament that was. 3M Open. Sorry, I'm on a new device here, if you can't tell, guys. A little bit different formatting. So things aren't quite what I'm used to here. So normally I'd have just the things at the top, right? It'd bring the tab down for me, but it's not the case here. But yeah, so he's been decent over that stretch. I think that you're looking at him, right, top 15 a couple starts ago, top 25 there. Just in terms of his high-end upside for the price tag, he makes sense because, look, by him, you have like Troy Merritt, right? Not a bunch of birdie upside. Kevin Streelman, not a bunch of birdie upside. Jason Day, right, speaks for itself. Even guys like a Harris English, right, he didn't make the cut last week, but he at least made a bunch of birdies. I'd rather get to guys like an English or a Svensson that when they make cuts, they're going to go out there and make 20 to 25 birdies than guys like a Jason Day, Troy Merritt specifically, right, Kevin Streelman, that even when they make cuts, may only make like 10 to 15 birdies on the day. I just would much rather get to the more aggressive players particularly when they're only 2.5% owned. Kind of like a Svensson, is there's not much trouble off the tee, so even though I'm looking at driving accuracy, you know, he's not going to hit it into the water, right? He's got that going for him at the very least, and he likes himself a bent grass surface and is a madman when it comes to making birdies. So we know he's going to be aggressive, go out there, try and put up the birdie production that we need. At Birdie Fest in the past has had some of his best performances. I mean, at the Bermuda Championship, you know, kind of like Lucas Herbert, another player that has had some success. And the shots gained metrics haven't been pretty for him. So we go down here, $6,800, take a look at good old Patty Rogers. Where you at? There you are. He's gaining a bunch off the tee, gaining a little bit on approach, which was actually surprising, and a significant gainer with the putter, right? We know the putter and we know the off the tee play is going to be there. It's the irons that can be a little bit sketchy for good old Patty Rogers. But when he gains with the irons, you got to watch out for him. He's got that top end upside because he has that off the tee play and the putting you're looking for. And given that he's gained on bend in the past significantly, given the fact that he's been a little bit better on approach of late than what we're used to seeing, I think he's worth buying in on. Next up, we've got David Lipsky at $6,600. Another gainer on bent grass, an aggressive player that's a solid wedge player, and only 0.7% owned. So nobody's giving him the credit he deserves. Just a lot of upside there. And I know the recent form, you know, he's been a little bit sketchy there. That's why we're getting him so cheap here. So let's see, where are you at, Lipsky? Yeah, missed cut his last 2 times out, but 46th, 27th, 37th, right? He wasn't horrible before the start of the season. He's going to get it together at some point, and we know when Lipsky gets it together, he has that top end, top 10 upside, which is lovely, given that he's sub 1% owned. And our last value pick is going to be Adam Schenk at $6,500. Now, Adam Schenk is a local, another Las Vegas player that plays Summerlin all the time, a prolific gainer on the bent grass surface. And what I like here about Schenk is that he's a high birdie percentage player. Now, the recent form hasn't been there. You take a look at him at $6,500, you'll see that he missed his last cut, right, but did make the 2 cuts before that. So he is a volatile player, but the course history, right, the course history for Adam Schenk is the creme de la creme here. So if you look at this, 3rd place last year, top 30, top 20, another top 20 back there in 2017. So he clearly likes the place, and a lot of the times he's come into this event, he's been in worse form than he is now. So when we take a look at the last 50 measured rounds, you'd expect this to be really ugly here, except that he's gaining on approach, he's gaining off the tee, and he's gaining around the green. In fact, he's just a slight loser with the putter. So though the recent form, like in terms of finishes, hasn't been all that great, he's been a much better player than people are giving him credit for. A lot of missed cuts on the number, which all look the same when we're looking at a game log, but when you look at the shots gained metrics, really do bear out. So love him at $6,500. Love the fact that he's still only 3% owned, and that is the last pick that we're going to talk about here. That is all I've got for you guys for this DFS preview. Still going to be going live tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So make sure to stop on by with any questions that you have. Be going through the weather report, a lot of the live strategy questions that you have. We'll go through a few lineups together, prize picks too. So if you're playing on that side, I'll be doing a preview there. And just overall, getting you prepped for everything you need to know for this weekend. So looking forward to it. Should be a fun event for sure. These swing season events might not get the best fields, might not get the most attention from all of us, but still a lot of high quality golfers, and really where we get to see who's going to be that next stud, right? The next up and coming wave of golfers like a Taylor Montgomery, Justin Suh, who I think is going to come around here at some point. We've already seen S.H. Kim look like an absolute killer, and there's going to be plenty more to join the fold. So I'm looking forward to it. Make sure you go ahead and smash the like button before you hopping out of here. Also, go ahead and comment down below who you've got winning this week. I'm going to take Tom Kim, but go ahead and let me know your thoughts down below too. But best of luck with all of your lineups, any outright bets that you decide to go with as well. And let's get this cash, fellas.